My favorite books to showcase are the lesser known ones, as I think they're the most worthy and interesting to share because of that and might introduce you to something new. This also includes books that are only lesser known to us because they weren't released in English, but because they primarily focus on visual art, which knows no language, foreign audiences may still enjoy them. So when Wind Thunder Studio from Taiwan asked if I wanted to review the art book for their game Heroine Anthem 0 Episode 1 Sacrifice, in exchange for mentioning that Heroine Anthem 0 Episode 2 Scale Scar's Oath has just been released for PlayStation 5 and soon for Xbox, I was very glad for the opportunity due to the fact that this book physically was only released in traditional Chinese as part of the collector's edition, yet it is a perfect example of just how beautiful artwork and interesting books can go under the radar for indie and or non-English games. As I said, the book originally came as part of the collector's edition when the game was first released in 2016. Two of my favorite things about this book are its physical qualities. First, it uses a wonderful matte paper that is so well chosen for this kind of art, and the image reproduction quality makes them look magnificent. The other thing is that when it arrived, I was surprised that the size of the pages was more compact than I was expecting. Only by a little, I'm talking like a couple of centimeters, but what I liked about this was that it confirmed my opinion that most art books use pages that are unnecessarily large. Of course, it's not the size, it's how you use it, but most books use it poorly anyway, so it was really refreshing to see a book with sensibly sized pages, neither any bigger nor smaller than they need to be. This may seem like an odd thing to get excited about, but it is so incredibly rare, and I am so incredibly pedantic that I found it impressive. However, I kind of suspect this might just be a happy accident rather than anything wiser, and I say that because that sort of impeccable judgment regarding presentation is observable nowhere else in the book. For example, though I like the general size, I was less thrilled by the square format, which unless you're very careful and know what you're doing is the worst format to use for a book, and this one does show the hallmark struggles I associate with the format. Specifically, blank space and images running across the gutter, so it possibly could have benefited from a landscape or portrait format given the types of images, but that wouldn't necessarily guarantee better layout. So considering how most art books layouts suck anyway, and their pages are too large, at least this one has the decency to be a modestly sized mess. But yeah, the layout is absolutely the weakest part of this book, followed by the curation. Layout, mostly for the two reasons I just mentioned, too many images spoiled by being run across the gutter, and too much blank space and just sort of general spaciousness and waste. For a 250-page book, it is surprisingly content light due to 1. Not enough images per page, and 2, this is where curation comes into play, visual repetition. The book relies way too heavily on showing the sketch or line art next to the final images. Artists who like seeing these sort of process stages will appreciate this more, but as far as I'm concerned, they should have cut the sketches and line art down significantly because it's needlessly repetitious. Typically, I don't enjoy books that come with collector's editions because they're usually less than 100 pages, which is just unsatisfying. So it was pretty disappointing to get excited that this book had 250 high-quality pages, but in reality feels like it has 120 pages worth of honest content that's been stretched and padded out to desperately fill 250. It's just masquerading as a more substantial book. Even more disappointing considering it doesn't contain all the art, which certainly would have been a better inclusion than blank space, line art, and other visual repetition. Though at least I can say the art that is on display is of such beautiful, high quality, despite their attempts to spoil a lot of it by running it over the gutter. But let's get into the specific contents a little more. So the first 60-ish pages are these stylized mural-type works and other equally gorgeous illustrations about the world's history and mythology. This section also displays the issues I've already mentioned, particularly visual repetition. So while the first 60 pages looks like there's a lot of images, it actually only contains 20 illustrations repeated, which they do through duplicating areas of the same image in close-up, as well as using one or more sketches that all look basically the same as the final image, just rougher. And these are tricks that are on display throughout, but this section is particularly bad. One feature that helps offset this somewhat is the text that runs throughout the book. It's just little bits of lore, way too short, shallow, and basic to be a selling point, but a nice accompaniment worth being in nonetheless. They just definitely could have made more of it. So then in the 70-page character section, as I said, we see the same problems, but here it's only like half the time, with the other half balancing it out with some really good stuff. There's better use of sketches that actually show more significant design exploration, and things are often a little more densely packed on some pages, which is nice. But then also for a lot of the characters, it's just like one large image of them per page. The next section is called storyboards, which is how they refer to these sort of cutscene illustrations. This section, while not as bad, is similar to the first in that, for me, these high-quality cutscene illustrations from the game represent the money shots. The whole reason this game deserves an art book. You know, they're proper narrative artwork, not just lifeless backgrounds or characters floating in limbo. That they make up so much of the content is great, but just disappointing that the book itself isn't able to live up to it. Because of running too many across the gutter, blank space, again, both of these probably a result of the square format, or just wasting twice as much space by including all the line art for the illustrations. But after this, for most of the book's last 75 pages, things make a noticeable improvement. Even though most of the best, or visually impressive, artworks have come before this, and despite all the previously mentioned issues persisting here, still making it suboptimal, it's far less of an issue. And in terms of an art book, and especially as a concept art book, better choices have been made with content and presentation, making it easily the strongest part of the book. I just wish the whole thing was like this because, yeah, it's a step up and that's great, but it's too little and too late in terms of being able to define the book overall. First, there's some character sketches, although we have seen some of that in the character section, plus these ones weren't that great as there was very little exploration and mostly just looking like what we've already seen. However, what is great and represents the truest concept art in the book is all the stuff on the environment. Also, the stage background layouts were really cool to be able to see in one image, and for both the environment concepts and stage layouts, subpar image layout aside, they're beautiful and interesting, and that even includes most of the sketches for them, which, unlike how they've been used in most of the book, are actually worth including in their own right. However, for both of them, I don't believe it contains everything, which, if that's the case, is a perfect example of something the book's page count could have been better used on. An unexpected inclusion for an art book was a couple of pages on the music. At only 6 pages, I didn't mind it being here as a little bit of variety, in theory. However, only 2 of those pages are actually nice behind-the-scenes info about the game's music. The other 4 pages are just biographies of the team unrelated to the game, so not only out of place to include in an art book, but far worse, another example of the book having too much boring fat. But then lastly, we get the fun, special, event, and miscellaneous art, which is always one of my favorite inclusions in any art book, but particularly for Eastern games who seem to make more of that kind of thing, and it's too often absent from Western art books. Unless you're able to navigate the second-hand Asian marketplaces online, getting hold of this book will be a challenge. Thankfully, there is a compromise in that on Steam you can get the digital version, which actually has some features the physical version lacks. First, it has a full English translation, and second, it's got an additional 50 pages, though of course given this book's layout it's more like 20 pages worth of actual content. However, this really irks me, and why I've been hammering this book for its wasteful layout and content, because the extra stuff in the digital version that the physical is missing isn't just filler crap, it's more of the cutscene illustrations and mostly miscellaneous and event art, i.e. the types of art that I singled out as being the best the book has to offer. Now, I could forgive that if the budget didn't allow for more pages to be added and they had done everything possible in terms of layout and curation to get as much as they can in here, and so the only way to show the rest was to include it in the digital version. I could understand that. But that's not the case. The whole point of this review has been how content light the book feels, how much blank space and bloated unnecessary inclusions there are. Yet they had much better art that should have and easily could have been in here to fix all that and make the book so much better. They just didn't. Incredibly unimpressive. However, if you like what you've seen and do want even more Heroine Anthem art, you will be interested to know that this is far from being the only art book in the franchise. Heroine Anthem 0 is actually a prequel to Heroine Anthem 1 and 2 from 2002-2003, and there are a couple of art books for those games. There was also another physical edition for Heroine Anthem 0 that seemed to include a much smaller art book, but how it compares to the one we've been looking at, I can't say, nor can I comment on any of the other books' contents or how they compare since I haven't gone through any of them. However, this may be something you want to look into. So to point you in the right direction, check out the Heroine Anthem page on the Art Making of website where I've compiled a list of all the books I'm aware of for the series. Sadly though, there hasn't been any sort of art book for Heroine Anthem 0 Episode 2, though I know that's something the developers would like to do if they can make it happen. In any event, you can still see a lot of it by playing Heroine Anthem 0 Episode 2 Scale Scar's Oath, which just came out in English on PlayStation 5 and soon for Xbox. It's even coming to Game Pass. Of course, you can also get it on Steam, where you can even download a demo and give it a try.